Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. Now, a lot of people are familiar with this case, but in order to start here, I've got to go back to 1896, where we see the case of Plessy versus Ferguson. So, in 1890, Louisiana passed this law stating that railroad companies had to have separate cars for whites and blacks. It was actually called the Separate Car Act. And so, if you bought a ticket to ride this railroad, if you're white, you had to get on the white car. If you're black, you had to get on the black car. Well, in 1896, a man named Homer Plessy decided that he was going to kind of test the boundaries a little bit. So he bought his ticket. He was a mixed man, actually, and he got on the white car. Well, the railroad company was already aware that he was going to try this because this was an experiment, and it was they were very public about this. Um, so they removed him immediately after asking him to get up himself. He didn't, so they remove him, and so he goes to the courts with it. And basically, what they rule is that facilities can be separate as long as they're equal. And so, fast forward to 1954, and over the years, the NAACP has been created. Different organizations like that have been created in order to fight this idea of separate but equal. Because, contrary to what they would say, these facilities were definitely not equal. And in the case of schools that we're about to look at, that was certainly not the case. These black schools were typically much worse off than the white schools. The facilities were definitely not as nice as the white schools. And the parents knew this. So, at the discretion of the NAACP, some of the parents tried to get their students into these white schools, but every single one of them got turned down. Not one kid made it into that school under the idea that these schools are equal. But I think everybody knew good and well that they were not. And so, because of that, the NAACP suggested that Mr. Brown take this to the courts. And that's exactly what he did. And so that's why we see it Brown versus Board of Education. He was not the only plaintiff, but they thought that it was the best move to put his name on the case for different reasons. But he was by far not the only one mentioned as a plaintiff. So they filed against the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. And in the end, what they decided is that Plessy versus Ferguson actually has no place in public education. It just couldn't hold up. And so what we see is Brown versus Board actually wipes that out. Because they ruled that Plessy versus Ferguson violates the equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment, saying that everybody deserves equal protection up under these amendments, and that's not what they were getting. And so that's what we see in Brown versus Board of Education. Some say that's what jump started the civil rights movement, and you could make an argument that either way, but I definitely think that was a huge step in the right direction. And then from that point on is when you start to see the schools are starting to integrate, and things as a whole are starting to progress. And so basically that's Brown versus Board of Education in a nutshell.